bypassing tradition and rendering the old redundant. But the web offers a flip side to Thiel's vision. There are other pioneers of the web who see in it a way to turn a community against the world, not to create a new openness or broader allegiances, but to narrow identity. Before the web, extremists tended to be scattered in small numbers around the world. The web linked them all, gave them new tools, allowing them to seize the initiative. Al-Qaeda quickly recognized this new medium's ability to spread the message of fear and terror.
Islamist groups have now chosen to primarily disseminate their material through the internet, because this way they can be fully in control in how the message is disseminated and where.
Pretty much every day, Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are putting out I suppose you could call them propaganda videos, where they're showing attacks or they're eulogizing particular leaders, one who's perhaps been killed in a drone strike. They will do a long, maybe even 40-minute video, mainly of somebody talking about this person's great deeds, interspersed with really quite high-quality video.
A lot of the message is based on anger and arousing anger. They use a lot of images of women and children killed, or other horrific images. It's more like shock tactics to kind of get you into gear, create that kind of sense of urgency.
Al-Qaeda, like the internet, has no center. It's a dispersed group of loosely associated people. Wherever jihadists are in the world, the web lets them talk to like-minded people, and their belief system is instantly reinforced. The web acts as a kind of virtual, portable homeland.
The concept of a portable homeland refers to how different groups operating in different countries in the world who have similar aims can use the internet as a space that links all of them. So the internet replaces in some way the borders of a particular country for each of these groups and links them as if they all live in one place.
After 9/11, when the Taliban were driven out at the time from Afghanistan, they moved to Pakistan. And a very important way of staying in touch with them was through cyber cafes, internet cafes, because they knew they couldn't get on mobile phones for fear of being tracked. And a lot of the terror plots that we've seen in this country have been traced back to cyber cafes in Pakistan, in India, in Bangladesh, and elsewhere.
The web collapses distances. Fanatics the world over can talk to each other with ease. The web allows them to create and live in their own little worlds. This is something Ishtaq Hussain saw firsthand in London when he was a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, the Party of Liberation.
If you live in an area where there's no like-minded people, you can just go on the web and communicate with people who are like-minded, so you don't even need to physically meet them. You've had individuals who've gone online, they've never even met members of these groups, yet they've read their writings, gone on their websites and radicalised themselves, a bit like your DIY type of terrorist. And we had a few cases here in the UK. So the web definitely does play a big part in this.
We are 100% committed to the cause of Islam. We love death the way you love life. I tell all you British citizens to stop your support to your lying British government.
This is what web critics call cyber balkanization. The web allows users to filter their worldview through selective reading and connections. Cranks speak unto cranks and reinforce their extremism. The way the web can help trap groups in their own twisted worldview is something that nags away at the man who created the web in the first place, in the hope that it would connect humanity, not divide it.
When they go to a website, the website only links to other websites which believe the strange things that these people believe. And then don't you then get people who end up sitting just by their computers communicating in such a way that when they meet somebody in the street, the only way you can communicate with them is to shoot them? No, that is one vision of a horrible cultural pothole.
I think one of the greatest paradoxes of the web is that, on the one hand, we applaud it for giving us all a voice and for giving us tremendous power. But on the other hand, This power can be used for good or for ill. As we put more and more of our lives on the web, we're becoming more and more vulnerable to the bad elements, to the networks of hate, and to the darker uses of the web.
The most extreme example of this menacing side of the web was plain to see as recently as 2007, when a whole country was almost brought to its knees via an assault directed through the web. Estonia, a tiny country of 1.5 million people situated on the border with Russia, has been described as the most wired country in Europe. 97% of all banking transactions are done online. So this was a tempting target for any so-called cyber warrior.
We are very involved in the digital revolution, if you will, and therefore we need to protect this, because if something does go wrong, we are uniquely vulnerable, and we don't want to lose this way of life.
In April 2007, a row broke out between Russia and Estonia, because the Estonians wanted to move this Russian war memorial from the center of Tallinn to this more remote location. To the many Russians who still lived here, this was deeply offensive, and they took to the streets in riots that lasted for 2 nights, Estonia's worst period of civil unrest.
But far more disruptive was what soon followed: a sustained cyber attack aimed at bringing down Estonia's biggest institutions. The most common form of cyber attack is called a denial of service. One computer sends instructions to a network of computers known as a botnet. These are just ordinary domestic computers that have been hacked and are now under the control of cyber warriors. This network bombards the chosen site with millions of requests. The site goes into meltdown trying to respond, and it means for the duration of the attack, no one can access the website, hence denial of service. In Estonia, in May 2007, the cyber attacks rained down on the economic heart of this tiny state.
It affected us mainly in that government sites were shut down, businesses were shut down, banks were targeted.
We had serious problems with the external internet site. So our customers couldn't get inside of the internet bank.
If you take down the newspapers, you don't know what's going on in the country. If you take down the banks, the economic activity is paralyzed.
Now, if you're an Estonian businessman in Paris and you need to contact your bank over the internet to get some funds out, you couldn't. And Estonia eventually shut this off by cutting themselves off from the outside world. They sealed the borders. They wouldn't take any incoming messages from over the internet.
What makes cyber wars such a threat to the state is that the state doesn't even know who or where the attack is coming from.
Very difficult to know who is attacking you in cyberspace, because cyber investigations usually end at a compromised computer in a third country on which the logs have been deleted.
It probably wasn't organized in Uruguay, or it probably wasn't organized in, I don't know, Mali.
We can't really tell today who was the mastermind behind it all, whether there was just one mastermind behind it all. And there is no clear evidence of state involvement. However, what we can show is that the Russian Federation did not cooperate in mitigating these attacks. So at least there might have been passive support to these attacks.
The Estonians I spoke with would not go as far as to accuse the Kremlin of launching the attacks. If I lived in a tiny country on the edge of Russia, I think I'd also be careful who I pointed the finger at. But my search to understand the new world order on the web took me to Moscow, and there I unearthed a promising lead. In a dingy townhouse, a commissar in Nashi, a nationalistic youth movement, agreed to talk to me. I expected the standard Russian denial of any involvement in the attack. Instead, the trail had led me to the very person who claimed to have attacked Estonia. It turns out a kid did it. This kid.
My role was such that I was an initiator of this battle on the internet. I was a developer of the technology used, in addition to being an organizer of these actions. More than 5,000 people were arrested in Tallinn at the time. Their human rights were violated on a mass scale. Our intention was to carry out a mass action and do what the Estonian authorities were most scared of. Because we couldn't go to Estonia, we did it over the internet. These were no cyber attacks as such. It was cyber self-defense. Cyber self-defense is no more than mass action on the internet. In the same way that we can carry out mass demonstrations on the streets and in the cities, we can now do the same on the internet. And I think that such mass demonstrations will be especially interesting and popular in the 21st century.
Did you arrange this of your own initiative? Was there any state involvement?
These actions were never supported by the state. It was a reaction of civil society, which really does exist in Russia. Of course, the Estonian authorities were embarrassed that ordinary 18 to 20-year-old men had crashed their main sites. So they made up stories, suggesting that the attacks had come from the Kremlin.
As the world becomes more connected, there will be the opportunity for nations to do bad things to each other. We haven't seen very much of it yet, but it's something that we have to think about for the future.
All you have to do is pick up the newspaper, and wherever you see there is conflict in the real world, there is conflict in cyberspace.
I think it's very cost-effective to wage cyber war. I mean, weapon systems tend to be very expensive, so I think that we'll see more and more of it.
At best, we've seen how the web can redefine democracy and open up new horizons. On the streets of Iran, it brought together a crowd to challenge a regime. Yet, at its worst, it's reinforcing prejudices and closing doors. In the hands of highly motivated Russian teenagers, it almost crippled a country.
At the moment, a quarter of the planet is connected. But I wonder what will happen when the remaining 75% comes online. Will the web help us to achieve greater global understanding? Or will we face new dangers that we never even imagined?
By giving everyone a voice, it does create a cacophony. And in this cacophony, often it is the most brutal, even ruthless and conniving voices that are heard.
Can a social network bring down a regime? I don't think it can bring down a regime, but I think it can contribute to it because it spreads ideas. And the more quickly ideas are spread and the more access people have to those ideas, then the quicker things can change.
I think that we can all get carried away in the kind of liberal technorati of metropolitan Western world, that somehow all the power is shifting, but actually this technology is accessible to a very few people in very specific places, and we are only at the beginning of being able to kind of see how that power balance will work out.
After 20 years, we're just beginning to see the huge impact of the web on the very nature of power and even warfare. The web confronts the world with both an incredible opportunity and an incredible responsibility. The question for the future is, how will we use it?